Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Rollwise podcast. This is the Armchair Analyst Edition. Today, we will be sharing our thoughts on a recent video posted by the character sheet at comicbook.com, in which two members of the staff over there got together with James Intricasso, and they ran through a combat scenario for the up-and-coming MCDM RPG known as the MCDM RPG, I guess. No, TBD, to be named. God,
That's
it would be
TBN.
really nice if they had a name for it.
You said TBD, it's TBN, it's to be named.
Oh, yeah. I was saying to be determined, but to be named. To be named, sure. Either way.
TBN.
But it would be nice if they had a name, just so that we could continue to call it by its forthcoming name instead of MCDM. But that's it actually has kind of a catchy number of consonants as we go through, I guess.
No, it's not a good. I look forward to having
it
a
is a
name.
Placeholder, and I look forward to the placeholder being replaced.
Well,
I look forward to it having its real name. I look forward to its christening, so to speak.
You've already got a bottle of champagne out to smack your book with, or at least my book. I don't know. So
I hope for your sake your book has the real name on it when you get it.
I'm sure it will.
18 months. 18 months would better have a real name by then, I think.
Well, I mean, they could ultimately say that the MCDM RPG is what it turns out to be. I mean, that's
true. They could
decide.
They could. I mean, they just call it the RPG. You know, that would be awful gutsy, I think.
That's what I want to call mine. The role-playing game when it comes out.
with its white cover, the straight block Arial typeface.
Yeah.
I guess so. If you guys were to name the MCDM RPG and you just wanted to throw out your best title for it, what would you name it at this point based on what you've seen?
I have no idea.
I don't know
either.
either.
Honestly, I'm not a great namer. I would have had to put a placeholder in as well, probably something awful like Codename Alpha or something, like, that's not what they should call it. That is not
Codename Alpha. That's
somebody with
it's
more
a fantasy
skills
game.
than I have.
It's a fantasy game. It wouldn't be Codename Alpha anyway. I really don't know.
Like I feel like it's like, basically getting ready for a name like Battleborn or something like that.
Can't use Battleborn.
No? Oh, never mind. They can't be that one then.
That was a video.
They will find something. They've said that they have things that they think it might be named, and it might be subject to change.
Coolwheel's pretty good at
there's a lot of development to go on. Yeah, there's a lot of development to go on. The company is MCDM, so naming it the MCDM RPG as a placeholder seems fine.
Yeah, no, it's just funny.
I don't think it's right now conducive to me calling up a group of people and saying, "Hey, come over to my house. I want to play this new game." The MCDM RPG, like, it's just a bunch of initials. It's like asking them to come meet you at H&R Block. I don't.
My role-playing game will be the role-playing game, and the sequel will be please play my role-playing game, and the final one will be please buy my role-playing games.
That's fair. But I think we've got off on a tangent here.
Yeah, we have.
So needless to say, as much as the gentle, ribbing that we have for the MCDM RPG, by no means are we going to challenge them in terms of creating our own RPG and going through the process of designing.
No, that's all a joke.
This is all a joke. Obviously, we have a great respect for the MCDM, their team and the community. So let's talk about the actual thing that we watched. First of all, we're not going to do one of those things where we like show the video and we all like stare off somewhere and then we kind of like pause this and have like a play-by-play. The video is like an hour long, so we're just going to kind of take it, kind of give our impressions, go through some highlights that we feel are worth talking about, and kind of discuss where that leaves us, considering that I did buy the game through BackerKit or whatever the hell it was. Whoever stole my money has got my money, and so I should be getting a game at some point. They lifted it out of my account when I didn't expect it, because obviously I don't know how any of this stuff works.
You forgot about
committed.
it.
You backed the project, and at the end of the end of the completion date,
and I don't want to hear
take
any
the payment.
crap about the fact that they warned me that the money was going to be coming out at the end, because
They
I don't
definitely
read all
told
my
you.
emails.
Yeah.
They definitely. It was definitely in something you clicked past too fast.
Which prompted Brent to say, "Have you never backed anything on BackerKit before or Kickstarter?" And you said they took my money out right away, and I was like, "Did you buy it at the end? Because that never happens."
I don't know. I'm not made of money, but obviously I have poor financial sense. So we're not going to show the video. Long story short, we're just going to talk about it. If you want to watch the video, I think we could just link it somewhere so you guys can get direct.
You can
to
put
the
it in the
source.
notes.
You can put it in the description.
Yeah. So we'll just
it's well worth watching if you're interested in the game at all. It's well worth watching.
Yeah, if you're not play testing as part of their playtest community and you just want to see how it works, this is a great method for you to see that. Now, if MCDM, gentle joking about the name aside, if they want to get and play test with us, we would not be opposed to that playtesting on screen or anything like that. But obviously,
they have plenty of playtesters that
I'm sure
pay them on their Patreon.
Yeah, they've got a robust Patreon community.
Mm-hmm. So first things first, just to kind of set the scene. What happened is that they basically had two people that were part of the character sheet at comicbook.com staff. They had each created a character. Then they went through the combat scenario. The combat scenario was basically 3 goblins versus 2 heroes.
And it was a dwarven battle master, tactician,
and a
elven
shadow, I think.
The roguey teleporty guy.
Yep. Yes. And so basically they got the battle map out. They went to town. So in there, what were your overall impressions, just big picture first? What did you guys think of the combat? How did you guys felt it flowed, etc.?
Do you want to go first, Brent, or do you want me to?
I want to steal your thunder by saying the first thing Jeff said was he never wants to play a game where he has to roll to hit anything again.
No, I don't. Honestly, I was watching the video. I was taking notes, and I hate to use this comparison, but it felt like a video game. The first turn, boom, stuff's happening. Not boom, I'm rolling a dice, and now I got to tell somebody what the dice are, and then they got to look, and they got to go, oh, you missed. You know what I mean?
Is it just the psychology of missing to you, or
no?
Do you feel
it's every time you roll a miss, and combat is the most dice heavy portion of most RPGs. It is a big fat nothing burger. It's like somebody came up and took a dump on your table every time somebody does that. And we have had combats as groups where you get 5, 6, 7 misses in a row. And it feels deflating. It feels frustrating. It doesn't feel heroic. It makes shit take way longer. Because combat can take a long time, especially well-balanced combat. But the first thing I noticed was it was like, yeah, we got something going on. And given that the game now has different types of mechanics to mitigate damage, right? I don't know. I was kind of excited. That was my first impression. I really was positive.
Yeah. Okay. So right out of the gates, action.
It does. Yeah. And it does really mitigate the whiff problem where it's like, oh, I missed, they missed, I missed, they missed. It does mitigate that problem, which is nice. I will say that.
And so, Brent, otherwise, what other opinions did you have about the?
My opinion is it looks a lot like what I remember 4th edition looking like, which I think they said a couple times in the video too. Is it's like 4th edition, which isn't something I wasn't terribly fond of. One of the things that I don't like again is I prefer theater of the mind style combat. And for him to say at the beginning of the video that here's your battle map as is required to play the game. If you like that type of game, that's cool. And I'm all for, and I don't mind playing. I would be okay with playing in a game like that, but it's just not my style. If I want to play a miniatures game, I'll go play a miniatures game is my whole thing.
Yeah.
It seemed fun. I in thinking about it, to Jeff's point, the no miss thing, like the no roll to hit thing, it does do that. It does eliminate that time where it's like, oh, whiff, nothing's happening in this combat now, which is nice. It was good to see that there will be ways to ablate damage, like to soak damage and stuff like that, which is something that we discussed. And the tough character seemed pretty tough when he got hit. I will point out though that I think there was a total of 5 creatures in the combat.
Yeah, was there 2 spiders or was there a 3rd spider?
There may have been 3 spiders, 2 small ones, and then there's the giant one at the end.
Yeah.
And then 3 goblins, right?
3 goblins.
And then 2 players, and the combat still took 45 minutes, which is still a long time for a combat, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and maybe, and I think that that's hard to balance. First impression, the first thing that I caught onto is I agree with you on that. He said, "Oh, here's your battle map as required," and that's one of the things, when you glop onto the word like tactical, tactical always seems to tell me, like, oh, you're going to need some sort of map to go with any kind of combat situation, and I've kind of vacillated back and forth. I can't say that I absolutely hate battle maps, and I can't say I absolutely love them. I just think that it makes it harder to. You have to be a well prepared DM in order to have a battle on the fly. I got to have a map I got to have a map for this potential conflict, and so you have to prepare a lot more to get into that. But as for the combat, I thought that combat was pretty smooth. It didn't feel clunky at all, even though they obviously were novice players of the system. The character sheet, when the guy kind of showed us the shadow, shade, whatever it was legible, easy to see what moves and powers that you could use and all those things very quickly. It didn't seem like it was going to have to pull out any advanced trigonometry or any kind of weird chi diagram to understand how my powers interacted with each other,
right,
and all those kind of things. And so I thought that was pretty cool to just as a new player. And if I wanted to get into a D&D-esque game, like, I feel like that would be easy to get into. That would not a lot to go on there. So in terms of mechanics and everything like that, you talked about the damage ablation. That was an interesting mechanic that I thought really saved the player's bacon. Almost every turn was having the ability to do something that said, "Oh, you can't do the damage that you thought you."
Yeah, the reactionary, but the one that I remember was the Shades reactionary ability, where it could move, it could teleport just out of range, which would half the damage.
Well, it's like
half the damage anyways, and then if they were outside of range, it did a d6 minus d6 from the damage.
Yeah, it was, and that ended up being it ended up mitigating almost all the damage that they got. But what was interesting to me is that if you didn't have your reaction ability, because I guess you only get 1 reaction per turn, it felt like you got hit like a truck.
You could. I mean, you definitely could. I liked that. The resource, right? Because you get the resource where you can spend it, but you could generate it within combat. Like, it was like a lot of games have those abilities, right? Where you can use it, right? Action points, whatever you want to call them, right? I know that I'm forgetting the video that I just watched earlier today, what it was called. But
focus, I think, was their
focus. Yeah, I think it was focus.
Each of them has a different.
They have their own.
Yeah. They each had their own. But I liked that you could generate it in combat. That it wasn't just like 1 or 2. Like, it wasn't an infinite supply. It didn't happen, immediately. But it wasn't like an all or nothing proposition where you've got to sit there and go, is this the one time where it's mission critical for me to do this, or do I just have to eat it for now? Which isn't a bad decision to make, but it feels like they've made a lot of decisions, especially with combat, to have things that keep people engaged and that also keep even the players whose turn it isn't. Like, one of the things that I thought was okay about 4th edition was that I sometimes had abilities that granted my teammates attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, if you're the tactician.
Yeah,
in
it's
4th
not
edition
just
or this. That's primarily what you do.
Right. One person playing and 4 people staring at their phones, looking at, I don't know, sports scores and comics and scrolling social media. You know what I mean? Because they
very
don't have
different
to pay
lives, Jeff. We
attention
don't
because
look at that.
it's not their turn. Right? Like I kind of like that. I sat down and I went, wow, this thing's going to be an hour. Right? I'm like, and it's just one combat. But I didn't notice the time passing as I watched it, even though it was obvious that 2 people hadn't played it and one person had only run it a limited number of times. Because I think James admitted to making a mistake. You know, he missed one of somebody's abilities, one of the bad guys.
Yeah, the fact
which
that
is fine.
A Bane or something, or
yeah, it happens all the time.
Yeah. And so, and I think that's interesting because in talking about like the engagement, I think that's a really important factor is the fact that you know, like when it's your turn, you don't just shut off. You actually have to pay attention to what's happening because you can use abilities to react in a way that could be beneficial either to yourself, like mitigating the damage, like the one Shadow Guy was doing, or, you know, maybe there could be other abilities that they have as reactions. And I'd be curious if those abilities came from like a menu or have the ability to change or evolve or update over time.
It's a good point.
We don't have the book and we haven't
Right.
seen the play test. So it'd be curious to see how that all
well, in 4th edition, which is the only thing I can relate it to, I believe you got a reaction ability every couple levels, and that reactionary ability, you could use one reactionary ability a turn. And they did different stuff. Like you might have one that's offensive and one that's defensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I liked that there was a variety of things that you could do. There was different things, some were triggered, some were just in response. I didn't mind that. The thing that I really liked, I know we're not there yet, but the thing that I really liked was resetting the turn order every turn. Like if I'm the guy going first, and now all of a sudden on the 3rd turn it's advantageous for Brent to go first, we can just say, hey, you know what? Brent's going to go first.
Yeah.
Instead of going, shit, now I can't do what I wanted to do because I can't. If I do that, I mess up his thing, and then I did it. We've all been there.
Well, and I think I've actually seen that a lot more in games, like even Fabula Ultima, because it's basically it's a side versus side kind of thing, and it goes, okay, Red Rover, who wants to go next?
Well, and usually games, I mean, even D&D usually mitigates that by saying you should reroll initiative every round. Most people don't do that just because it's another dice roll you have to do. So yeah, a lot of people are starting to get to those easier initiative systems where it's like, hey, the players decide who goes first.
Yeah. I
think like in Conan, that was one thing that I liked is like the players always go first unless this is the Modiphius' Conan, Free League's Conan, one of the two. No, it's Modiphius. But yeah, the 2d20 system one is like the players always go first unless the DM spends Doom, which is his resource, and he says, "I'm taking the initiative in this combat."
Which lets you know that it's on now.
Yeah, it's gonna be. He has a plan. It's probably gonna be a problem. So yeah, I think the easier initiative. I do prefer the non-rolling initiative systems where you say, yeah, players should just go first, unless something happens.
Yeah, the only tricky part is then I feel like in this example, with the opposing team having more people on their team than the players did, that's where I'm always curious because it feels like it's pretty tit for tat when it comes like, oh, the players and the monsters are kind of going, but then all of a sudden now it's just monster. And when you saw how the like the reaction abilities mitigated so much damage up front, what happens in that tail end? And I'm curious to see how those combats where it's like really, if it's really good to have an uneven number like that, because you could chew into those characters pretty good if you get some good rolls.
Well, you guys love to talk about action economy, right?
Well, I mean, no, that I was just going to say that that was one thing that happened. One thing, so action economy 1 and 2. I'll get to action economy in a second. But one thing that happened in 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons when I played it is some GMs started looking at the player's abilities like a problem to solve. like tactically, what would we do to mitigate his being able to teleport out of range? Oh, 4 archers shooting him instead of just 1 archer just shooting him, because he can only use that ability once. So
that feels confrontational from somebody who's supposed to just be controlling the game state and not trying.
But
to
it just happens sometimes, like because if your NPCs always make dumb decisions where like 1 archer shoots the guy every round, it's like, oh well, this isn't dangerous or epic at all. It's just, you know, grinding through another combat. So it's balancing that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's every system that we've played, because we've all played some role-playing systems that frankly weren't great. And you know it, and it's usually because something's out of whack, something's not balanced, or something wasn't considered when the game was created. You know, there was just an idea that was missed, and it creates holes that in certain strictly controlled scenarios don't occur. But then you get out in the wild with actual players making odd decisions.
I think the amount of play testing of MCDM is going to be good, because I think what happens a lot of time is someone has an idea that's fantastic, and then unless you have the guy that thought it up standing there telling you this is how it works, like it just doesn't translate right. Like Fading Suns is a game I talk about quite a bit, is a system that I was super excited about the game, and then I strongly disliked their mechanic, because it had victory points and staged successes and stuff, and like you could like hit the person but then not do any damage based on your victory points that you had, and like there was this weird abstraction that happened, and I think it probably works really well for someone. It just wasn't for me. And I think that's the same thing, is like I hope, and I'm sure through playtesting it won't be that you know, somebody who made the game has to be telling you how it works.
No, and I feel like, and you guys have heard my common gripe recently, you know, and honestly, I thought Fallout would be much more poorly received after I shot Brent in the face, first combat we ever did. But apparently, it didn't bother him as much. But there was some ambiguity to some of the rules that they had, like the obtain information rule. It just seemed like it didn't fit. It didn't really have a clear like guidance as to how that would go.
Yeah, that's a good example too.
But like, I feel like in the MCDM stuff, at least based on what I saw, is that everything seemed to have a fairly good, like concise, this is how it works in the combat and everything like that. And I think that, you know, it's really up to you as the player to decide how those abilities, you know, how they become imagined and how it becomes that cinematic game. Now, I think that in terms of you know, the cinematic promise that they've made, did it feel cinematic to you? I feel like it felt action packed, so I'd say it kind of felt like it was leaning that way.
I thought it was definitely leaning that way. Again, considering that you had, you know, newbies doing it, I think it only gets better from there. But it was just one combat. It was a limited number of participants on both sides. You know, it was just one encounter, but I'm optimistic.
Yeah. Now I think that in terms of like in terms of the game itself, you know, I think there's a lot of optimism to be had and all those kind of things. But are there any warning bells that are going off in your head as to, you know, what you're seeing emerge so far as to things that make you less excited about the game?
I mean, it having a battle map means that I won't ever run it. Like, I'm just not going to run attack. I'm not a tactical enough person to tactically plan out a combat with a battle mat and everything like that. First off, even in the war games I've played, it's more just like run up and into things. So I'm just not that tactically minded, and I don't really feel like I need, for how I like to narrate combats, which I don't want to be super, which I usually don't want to be super all the time anyways. There needing to be a battle map pretty much means that I won't run the game. I would gladly play the game. I think it'll be fun to play. And I was going to mention this. One of the things that I liked about their example is, one of the problems I had with 4th edition is all of the characters kind of felt the same with the abilities that they had. Everybody had their once a day. Everybody had their once a combat, and they all felt
you had your nuke, your mini nuke.
Yeah, it all felt kind of the same because I didn't feel like the characters were the same. I felt there was a pretty good distinction between the characters, which I think is very important. Like I think that's one of the points that was really a problem with 4th edition is like everyone kind of felt the same. Like even though they tried to split it up into like you have your tanky guys and your damage guys.
Yeah,
and stuff like
they
that.
each had their roles.
It didn't seem to do very well.
Outside of the roles, if they weren't doing something specific to the role in 4th edition, it's almost like the game was too perfectly balanced. And like every character felt like every other, like, oh, we all do around 6 points of damage when we hit.
Right.
Oh,
it all came out to be numbers.
You know, it felt like the algorithm was too flat.
My spammable attack does this much damage every turn. Oh, mine does that too. Mine's green in the book. Well, mine's orange because it's a fireball. Oh, okay. It came down to just being kind of particle effects. And then that balance also led to some weird classes. Like I don't remember what the class was called, but there was this one class where I read design notes on it and it was like, well, this class is designed to just isolate the big bad from everybody else and fight it while they take care of everything else. Well, that's not a good balanced class because then it can just do that all the time. Like what's going to stop it from just killing that big bad and then moving on to the next one? Like weird balancing issues like that kind of cropped up. But I did like that the characters felt different. Their ability to mitigate damage was different. The way that they seemed to be doing damage was different, which I think is a big deal. As far as red flags, I didn't see any real red flags other than like just personal ones for me. But as far as it being a playable, entertaining game, I think that combat was good. One thing I will say is even without the hit rolls, it was still 40 to 45 minutes one combat with 2 people and 5 monsters. I would say combat's going to be a big part of the game because if you have 5 players and I don't know 10 monsters, like that's going to be a pretty long combat, I think.
It kind of felt like it would be a war game at that point with the battle map and minis and stuff. And I think that's a good point. I think I have some comments about it. But Jeff, what about you? Did you see anything that kind of made you?
I didn't.
I hate to call it the ick, but
I
don't consider that a red flag.
I agree with Brent on the theater of the mind thing until it comes to combat, because I've actually asked you guys this in other games we've played. I'm like, God, I wish we had a map so I could understand relationally where we're positioned and because that's how my mind works. Yeah. Like maybe it shouldn't, but it does. Like I want to know if I'm throwing something if you're standing in front of me. Even and I'm the only one who cares. I understand that I'm focusing on details that nobody else, that it doesn't matter. But I sort of like understanding the relative position of everyone in the combat.
And I believe my response to that in the past has been, let's see if you hit them. Let's see if you screw up or not on the dice roll.
That's true.
Yep. They were in the way.
It's actually, I mean, it's an interesting concept because, I think when I was looking at this, that the battle map was really important exactly for the reasons why you're describing, Jeff. And in this case, it's exceptionally important because distances are crucial to how your character behaves in the battle map. Now, I think that there are games, and Fabula Ultima being our most recent example, and I think even Fallout 2D20 eschews the idea of having a direct 25 50, whereas whereas D&D for some reasons like, oh, we're all theater of their mind, but you can only cast a fireball 30 feet,
right? Like, it's not really though. Any game that has attacks of opportunity pretty much flanking is saying, any game that has that stuff in it is pretty much saying you might consider miniatures
or even exact distances. And I think that with the MCDM RPG, you do get exact distances. You get number of squares, like it's 2 squares. And if you can't do it 2 squares, I would really feel that would be that would make it hard to translate. It would be curious if they did provide optional rules for how you could play this in Theater of the Mind, because I do feel like somebody would homebrew it. Like, anything between 2 and 5 squares is considered near but not close, and anything 5 squares or longer is considered medium far. You know what I'm saying? Like you could range that out.
They've got a lot of writing to do, and we've got a lot of reading to do before we even.
I think they should go with it, because they're definitely playing to an audience that wants that type of game. And I think him saying it might not be the game for me, but I think if somebody says, you need a battle map, like at least you know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, and I think they should go with it, because I know there's a lot of people that love that sort of game. They like the tactical battle mat combat in their D&D game.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, there was I think it was a Dimension 20 clip that I saw where basically I think it was Brennan had put all of his troops in a line, and then Emily was just like, I can just lightning bolt that column of people you put right in front of me, right? And he's just like, yes, I didn't realize they were a column of people until you told me that just the second.
Right.
And you can capitalize on those kind of like tactical issues where the people do, and that's a feel good moment, because you're just like, they didn't realize that they messed up, and I can totally take advantage of this with a cool use of my character's ability to really have the spotlight. And I think that's a cool visual to have that opportunity to do so. And I feel like in big battles where you can do that, it's much more glorious than if you just are like, oh, I check, are they all in a line in my theater of mind? Because then the DM's like, no. Obviously they haven't all lined up in a perfect line.
Right. Or they say yes because they want to give that moment to the player.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brent.
What do you feel about those elements in a virtual tabletop versus being on a real game board with real minis?
I think honestly that so I've played on a real game board locally with people, and we've just used a whiteboard kind of thing where we drew a rough sketch of a battle map and everything like that. And that's sufficient. But I think there is something immersive that you can achieve when you do a virtual tabletop, that if you really want to get into it, you now have the terrain, you have walls, you have you have bushes, you have all those things that don't really translate in my whiteboard marker days, because obviously I'm not going to sketch out an entire, like, all the different terrain and all that stuff. And
but I guess what I'm saying is, do you feel like your D&D games, or whichever games you were playing, would have benefited from that person having the real, like, they did have the terrain, they did have the monster miniatures that they painted,
did have elevations,
they did have elevation and stuff like that. Like, do you think that would compare?
I think it's a different experience. Like, I honestly, I don't need it. And in fact, I kind of have moved away from it because I feel like tactical maps are clunky as hell sometimes.
Well, so do I.
Sometimes
it takes a 10-minute combat in theater of the mind and makes it an hour and a half combat in
and that's kind of my point. And what I would say is, in a person that plays war games, and I guess maybe this is part of my problem with the virtual tabletop idea, is when I play like Warhammer 40K, like 50% of the game for me is visual. It's 50% of the game is, oh, they look fucking badass with on the terrain and the battle mat and the painted minis and stuff like that. And I guess I just don't get that from a battle mat from a virtual tabletop.
But I
don't know. The maps are so much better though. Yeah. Like, okay, not compared to Warhammer terrain, but the virtual tabletops that we've played on, okay, we've had some with some bad maps, but some of them have been amazing and better than anything I played on at somebody's table. Because it's usually just vis-a-vis marker,
right? It's usually the whiteboard marker, because not everybody invests in buying the terrain. But what I'm saying is I think that moment that you're talking about in the D20 table is, let's be clear, it's not a whiteboard on that D20 moment. Those are well painted. That's well painted terrain and miniatures.
That's full immersion.
No, that does give you full immersion. And it's weird because, the closest I came to playing any of GW's products were probably two games. It was probably Necromunda and Blood Bowl. And all that tells me is what I care about is squad-based combat. I don't want army-based combat. The army-based combat, after a while, when I've got 150 individual units that have to do something on a turn, after about 4 turns, I want to shoot myself. Sorry.
4 turns is about 6 hours. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, at that point, I'm ready to die, because I'm either bored or disinterested. I know how the combat's going. I feel like chess. I'm just gonna tip over my king because I'm fucking done. But I think what I like is the tactical is squad level stuff. So skirmishes.
Yeah, this would be perfect for you.
But there was something, and the only thing I will say in the terms of the virtual tabletop, I really did enjoy the way the dungeon crawl happened on Roll20 when I got the whatever light component.
Well, yeah, you had the lighting and the fog of war, and
had the fog of war, the lighting, and everything like that. So you guys could move around, and you guys could actually explore the dungeon, which being that we're all in different places, I thought that was kind of neat that I did, and that's different than the terrain because it does, it was something that you revealed as you went. I felt on some levels that it was kind of like a little bit strange because then the reason I kind of was like, I don't really like this as much anymore was because it then felt like you guys were moving tiles in a video game. And I was basically programming and pop goes the weasel because you entered into this room or something like that. And it felt a little bit wonky, but I liked the concept of like, oh, you go into this dungeon, you're kind of always on alert. I didn't have to rely on describing a room perfectly because then you guys like, oh, well, I missed what he said at the beginning. And then you missed that I had said that there was a door off to the right.
Yeah,
so you went left.
There's advantages and disadvantages to all of it. I mean, the first time I saw Dungeons and Dragons played, right? They had a grid map. It was laid out really well. And then there was cardboard all over everything. And as long as you moved in a straight line down a hallway, it was easy to reveal the right amount of cardboard, right? Like I moved 40 feet. Okay, well, you can see 40 feet down the hallway. But if somebody wanted to go somewhat, it wasn't a sandbox, because if they wanted to go over there where there wasn't anything drawn or, nothing was covering, it was much more awkward, even though they had a really good map, to let you know how.
It was more curiosity, because I really feel like tactical combat would shine in an environment where people approach it more like a hobby with the terrain.
No, it's true. I like the idea of having super detailed models. One of the things that's thrown me about some of my virtual tabletops is it feels like your character's a tiddlywink, or we're outside playing football, right? And it's like, I want to be the bottle cap and I want to be the piece of glass. Like, they're not people; they're just little tiny shapes, and that sort of loses.
Really hard on some of those models, Jeff.
No. Your models were fine. That was not a directed comment.
No,
I've just played on some virtual tabletops where it's basically you got a circle and a square and a triangle, and those are your three guys.
Yeah, no, I get you, and don't get me wrong. I think your point is well made, Brent. Is that there is like when you get into it and you treat it like a hobby and you invest in all those extra accoutrements, you have a different experience. I just feel like for me and my ability to store that much stuff, it's not there.
Well, no, I mean, I'm 100%. I mean, if you saw what much ran,
I know what your stuff looked like before I left, and it was already
so it's a disaster. But anyways, personal attacks aside, I was just more curious because and we've diverted the subject completely to tactical wargaming, but I think that's one of the areas that we're gonna this game would excel. And I think a virtual tabletop for me, like I said, like tactical battle mats don't make the game for me. So I think that's something you have to really, I think that's something you're really gonna have to enjoy. Is that tactical skirmish based combat. And I think like I said, I think I'll have fun playing in a game like that. Like I had fun playing in the D&D game with the with the virtual tabletop maps and everything, and some of the stuff was really cool. But it didn't make or break the game for me, I guess is what I'm saying.
That's fair.
And it being required would be something
well,
more power to them though. I think that's cool that they're saying this is what we want from our game, but I just don't think it'll be.
Yeah.
I will say this, it makes it less accessible. Every time you add a new requirement into that potentially costs money, at least for one player in the group, if not all the players in the group, it does potentially make the game slightly less accessible.
Yeah.
Like I've played in groups where literally we had one guy that didn't have internet. It wasn't an option, which seems weird, but his particular situation, if he wanted to play with us, he went to the library.
Yep.
And that's always awkward.
Yeah, and that's another thing I would say is and this is one other thing that I would say about tactical battle mats is it steers the game in a direction towards combat again, because you do have that visual component for that stuff. And so, like, if you are a person who, say, in real life spent money on terrain and stuff like that, like, that's the part of the game you're going to want to get to, because you're going to want to put that shit out on the table.
That's true.
So you're going to just psychologically, you're going to kind of look past some of those more role play parts to be like, I got to get my fucking dragon that I painted, spent 12 hours painting, out on the fucking table. So these
12
guys
hours.
Fight it.
Were you slumming it before you?
I don't think I've ever spent more than 12 hours on a single model. That looks good enough for me. Style model painter.
Is that I am not even at that level, so I bow to anybody who can paint.
I think if you, wow, this is divergent again. No, it's not slap chop.
Divergent.
There's a style I like, and I just do the models in the style that I like. Because I'm the one that's going to be looking at them the most. So I just do it how I like. Sometimes it looks good, sometimes it doesn't. There are models that I've spent more time on. I just don't count the time. I just kind of stare at it and be like, all right, I think that's done enough to where I'm happy with it. Because you're always going to, as somebody who's paints, you're always going to look at the thing and go like, man, I should do more to make that look better.
I could have done this.
And then if you do that forever, you just never have a product. Like, you just have...
That's true.
Art that just sits there.
No, and that's what happens with me is I would give up, and that's why my armies were relatively unpainted after.
And then there's the point where you can get to things that are just overworked. Like, I've literally done too much to this model, and it doesn't look right.
That would be me. I would spend 6 hours on the first guy, and then I would wake up the next morning and look at it and go, I can't show this to anyone, and I would burn all of the models. And been like, I don't know what happened. Somebody stole them. I can't play this game anymore.
But Jeff, we would be supportive of your paint job. Obviously,
no.
As long as it can
if it doesn't pass my muster, it's never seeing the light of day.
Well,
it's a brain problem.
That's why you do test models till you're happy with it, and then you go, yep, that's it. And then you realize you spent $140,000 painting test models that you're gonna just put in a corner somewhere. To get the color scheme to paint for the other model, to get the color scheme to paint the actual color scheme.
I have an entire army now of test models.
I usually put them in bits boxes and sell them, bits bags and sell them.
Oh,
nice.
Test
models.
That's cool.
So I guess this just became a promotion for Brent's bits.
No, that is a shitty business. Let me tell you. But anyways, moving on. So
moving on. So
subconsciously, as that sort of game, if you are the type of GM who like puts this work into the terrain and stuff, that's the part of the game you're going to want to get to.
Yeah.
No, I think that's I mean, it's a valid point.
But I will say
it is. But
the combat did seem pretty smooth.
Go ahead, finish.
The combat did seem to be pretty smooth, and pretty fun for what they did. Sorry, Jeff. Go ahead.
No, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, if the game was being produced by somebody that I had less faith in, somebody that had not. One of the things that I really like about what MCDM is doing right now is they are being very open about the process. Mm-hmm. It's not 100% transparency, and you're not going to get that, right?
And you shouldn't.
But they are finishing things and letting people see them and being very open about, these are what we're thinking about. We've talked about doing this, and then we decided not to, and providing Q&A sessions, and I think they've been very open. And one of the things that, and I don't know Matt Colville as well as you guys do. Like, I've not followed him for as long as you guys.
I'm not an expert. I don't think.
No, I'm not either. But even in the shorter amount of time that I have had following his channel and listening to some of his stuff, it's impressive to me how completionist he is. Like, as a DM, like, I would want to sit down and play with him, and I know that. I have faith that it's not just going to be a combat game. Like, I think combat's going to be a major portion of it, right? I think that's why you have the VTT. But I do think negotiating and doing other things is going to be a huge component of it, which gives you the option to role play more, which I think is great. As I've become more comfortable actually role playing, I've come to appreciate those parts of the game. It's easy to hide behind combat because you don't have to do anything other than say I swing this or I do this or. But
But it's one of those things. I think if they get the combat right and it feels good to play that part of it, then the rest of it falls into place. Because I've never been I've never said, oh, let's play this game that has really shitty combat rules, and then but the rest was polished.
But the bartering was amazing.
Yeah, but it's usually been like, oh, the combat rules are good, and I mean that leads to you getting into combat. Whereas like something like Vaesen, they shy away from combat because if you're getting in a fight with a Vaesen, you should do poorly. That shouldn't be a happy ending for anybody involved.
Face should be removed.
Unbalanced. But this it seems like it's a good balance. And I mean, other than the goblins that seem to have themselves 30+ hit points per goblin.
The goblins were tough, and then the spiders crawled out. I was like, hey now.
Yeah, there was a lot going on there. But
That's a surprise.
But it did seem as though like cool things happened. I mean, it seemed like a lot of cool things happened, and I think as a player that wants cool things to happen, like you're critting on 11s and 12s, which gave you extra dice. You had abilities that you could trigger. That one guy who hit that assassinate on that goblin sniper, it was like you were triggering stuff, and you kind of saw how victories played into the combat. So your prior battles were leading to this point. So I mean, it didn't feel like you would be. Like if you played it right, it doesn't seem like you would get bored.
No, doing stuff is what makes a combat game. Like doing stuff is what makes the combat in the game. And like I said, though, like when we talked about Pathfinder, the one thing that I thought I really liked about Pathfinder versus D&D was the 3 attacks thing. Mm-hmm. It felt like I was doing things all the time instead of doing nothing. And the game seems to capture that. So far, from what we saw, the game seems to capture that, which I think is good. The other thing I do have a lot of faith in, especially from like the comments that we got on our other MCDM videos, is just how much the community is willing to invest in helping make the game good through playtesting and feedback and stuff like that. I think that's the part that is going to really make the game successful, is people are playing it and they're giving their feedback.
Yeah, they're not only paying people to invest time in it, they have a bunch of people investing a ton of time. Some of them that are actually paying for the right to do it, from what I can tell, like, to playtest. So that's awesome. I applaud everyone who's doing that, because you're going to make the game better.
Yep. So no, I think honestly, it does, like I said, other than the tactical component requiring a battle map, because I don't think tactical and theater of the mind are mutually exclusive. I think you can still have fun doing them to a degree. I just think the battle map helps facilitate it a little bit more. But needless to say, I'll be getting this when it comes out. Like it'll be coming to me hopefully in some mail somewhere.
And I will say that I am happy you backed it.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
I don't feel like it didn't feel like the wrong decision until I forgot that it was actually not paid for first of the year. But
I would have backed it at the end of the campaign, but I was financially at the end of December. It was not a decision I could make at that time, and so if there's a second chance. I'm at least getting the player's book.
And I would have backed it if the Ajax level wouldn't have been bought out already. I'm kidding. I'm totally
You missed 2 rounds of Ajax.
You missed 2 rounds of Ajax, Brett. How did you sleep on the second round?
I am the guy that will buy the weird little games that people don't know about until I'm like, hey, we should try this.
Yeah, so speaking of weird little games, obviously Modiphius is an unknown publisher, so you should watch us on Monday while we go and continue our adventure through the wastelands. So that's our little plug for our actual play. Or at least at the time of this. So if you happen to be watching this far in the future, we apologize. We're probably playing something else.
You could still find it though. You could go look and
go click on some playlists and it'll be there.
Yeah,
just for
Fallout,
2D20. Fallout. The RPG.
Is that what it's called? Just Fallout, the RPG. Just look for that. You'll find it.
Yeah,
you can watch my character get buckshots in the face first.
Hey, I had to limp on both legs. Like I didn't get shot in the face.
It's not limping if it's both legs. It's painfully walking is what it is, because I don't think you can limp on both legs.
Ow! 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 Ow!
I don't think you can. I hadn't really thought about it, Brett, until you said it. But that does change the dynamic of those old westerns. Shit, I was shot in both legs.
Yeah, it's not limping if it's both legs. It's at best moving very slowly.
You're a cripple. So yeah, so watch our shenanigans, watch our misfires, and obviously, we try to play Mondays at 8:30 Pacific time. So if you're interested and you've made it to the end of this video, don't hesitate to drop a like, set a reminder for yourself, subscribe, do all those things that help, help it, because we obviously like talking with the people that hop on our videos and chat with us, and we like hearing people's opinions as to how they've experienced role-playing games. And obviously, many of you are very good at role-playing games, and we like getting your advice and tutelage and all that stuff when you drop
your
some really
feedback
cool
has
comments.
been fantastic. So
Yeah,
we really appreciate it. So,
because
and you can also find us at Jeff Places.
Yeah, if you agree with us, disagree with us, shouting into the ether not good enough for you, find us on Facebook, Threads, Twitter, or YouTube at Rollwise. Or you can email us directly, rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And as always, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate all of the attention you give our faces and the sounds of our voices. And as always, please roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there, everybody. Bye.
Thanks.